Welcome to the UK RunChat Podcast. I'm Michelle, and today's episode is something a little bit different. Now, we often speak to runners who love the sport, people chasing PBs, doing huge running challenges, racing marathons, building their lives around running. Today's guest is Alex, who is an international mountain leader, polar expedition guide, and photographer based in the Swiss Alps. And she moved from leafy Wimbledon to St. Moritz 6 years ago. Now, Alex climbed the 7 summits, including Mount Everest. Now, they're the highest summit on each continent. And she's in fact the first Hungarian person to ever do so. What an achievement. And she's written a book called Beyond the 7 Summits, which brings together these stories and lessons. So Alex joining me today to share a more honest side of adventure and how running has actually played a huge part in her preparation for training for dangerous mountainous environments. So really excited to get into it. Thanks so much for coming on to the podcast today, Alex. It's really nice to meet you.
Michelle, thank you very much. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I am right in saying you're the first Hungarian to climb all the 7 summits. Is that right? That's an amazing achievement.
I am, yes. And I didn't know about that until about halfway through the 7 summit. So I really didn't start that challenge to, chase titles or badges but once I found out, I think it's giving me an extra motivation to finish the 7 summits and put my tiny little country on the mountaineering map.
So just give us an overview of what the 7 Summits involves. And were you a mountaineer before you took on this challenge? What kind of experience did you have?
So I grew up in Hungary, and unfortunately the Alps don't quite reach into Hungary. But I had a chance to go skiing when I was at school. I spent some time in the mountains, and all I remember, I was always just fascinated by the mountains, like sitting on these buses and coaches traveling across Europe. And I just remember every time we were near mountains, I was just absolutely fascinated, even as a young girl. Where I live is quite hilly, so I'm kind of used to living in a beautiful kind of green leafy area with lakes, and we had summer houses. So I kind of grew up being sporty. And then from Hungary, I moved to the UK, and I must admit I wasn't that really into outdoor sports for quite a few years. In my 20s, I was focusing on my career and, university first and then my career in marketing. And it wasn't until I realized that, just the Monday to Friday was a little bit too much and I needed to switch off at the weekends. And the switch off shouldn't be, going and partying. And I was craving something more. So slowly and gradually, I got into kind of hiking, in the Lake District, Brecon Beacons, Snowdon National Park. And then I picked up photography again. I love photography. And it wasn't really until 2014 when I came up with the idea to do a challenge. So the challenge actually was, as a photographer, I wanted a project to push me as a photographer. So mountaineering wasn't really the main goal. I wanted to take some beautiful pictures, and I knew I had zero patience, like with landscape photography. So this whole project started from me wanting to push myself and see if I could take nice landscape pictures. So my very, very first ever thing that I did in the wintry mountains was to do a one-on-one hill, like winter mountaineering course up in Scotland for like a weekend. And then I figured, now I'm a mountaineer, after a weekend course, I might as well do something big. And that was it. So the 7 Summits was born from kind of an idea from like a photography angle, really. And then, the rest is history, as they say.
Leap though, Alex, if you don't mind me saying, from photographing mountains to thinking I'm going to climb the highest summit on every continent. Like that's huge. I'm guessing you're that sort of adventurous person anyway. You don't mind kind of diving straight into something.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, being an actual guide, a mountain and polo guide, I often have to think about that. That was my journey. But when I'm with my guests or when I'm arranging, a future expedition for my guests, I have to realize that there can be a more gradual sort of build up to the big goal.
So where did you start then with the challenge? Like, did you think? Because I'm the sort of person who would want to. I'd need to get kind of all the experience first, and I'm kind of a bit of a planner, less of a doer really. I'm kind of a. I like to know I can do everything first, you know. So where did you start?
So I started. So the idea was born in April 2014, and 2 months later, I was on the summit of the first one, and, and that was Elbrus. That was Europe's highest mountain, Elbrus in the Caucasus Mountains. And I don't know about you, but I grew up thinking Mont Blanc was
Yeah,
Europe's highest mountain. And I remember coming back from Elbrus and imagine a complete whiteout on the summit, imagine storm. And as a photographer, I couldn't even see my teammates on the side. I'm like, what did I sign up for? This wasn't in the contract. So it was great because the first mountain of the Seven Summits project was really, really hard. We were there pre-season. And what now looking back, I realized that mountain taught me so much. And it taught me that, look, I may not have been high altitude prepared. I may have, the highest I had been at that point was probably the Chola Pass or Kalapatar, doing a solo Everest Base Camp Gokyo Lake trek in winter, as you do. And you learn a lot from these first expeditions. And I would never underestimate a mountain or an expedition, but that one was really, an eye opener. And the way I built up climbing the seven summits was, required that organization. It required that planning of, okay, let's start with the one closest to me. Let's figure things out. And then we're going to go higher, further, colder. And this is how I set up this project to climb the seven summits.
yeah. So talk to us a little bit about your training for it, then, Alex, in terms of your like physical and mental training.
Yeah. So physical was the part that I knew I was in a decent shape. I knew I could run a half marathon, not very fast, but I had that physical sort of training already just by living in Wimbledon. Running a little bit, doing some weekend hikes. But I knew that when it comes to altitude as well, and when it comes to longer expeditions, what you have to think about is not just perform on that day when the race is, but you have to be able to each and every day wake up in the morning, even sleep deprived, or you haven't eaten well, or you maybe have a tummy bug, or just like feeling a little bit lethargic, or altitude, and each and every day you have to get up and keep going. So I knew that I had to really figure out how to train in a smart and clever way, working Monday to Friday and being able to do kind of long days and back to back. And I found doing longer runs at the weekend, I found doing double spin classes during the week really helped. I remember I was so sheepishly went into this spin class, and after 45 minutes, they're like, yeah, the class ended. I'm like, no, I need more. I want more. So I ended up chatting with the instructor. I said, would it be possible if I just stayed for another class? And from that moment, they knew whenever I come in, I would stay for a double. So yeah, it's all about kind of building that up, and every single mountain is so different, and the way you have to train for them is very different. But with the first one, I just didn't know, so I just figured, okay, I'm gonna do the long back-to-back days. I'm going to try to train every day, doing different things that I enjoyed, so running and biking. So this time, when I was doing the spin classes and training for Elbrus back in 2014, I didn't even have a proper bike. I was just going from spin classes to spin classes, and just doing short runs during the week and longer runs during the weekend. And the mental preparation, the mental side was probably the part when I was looking into the history of Elbrus, when I tried to familiarize myself with the area, how we're going to get there, what's going to happen when we are on expedition, and of course, each of the 7 summits had a completely different team, and again, these things that somehow unfolded during the expeditions, and me realizing that the biggest challenge for me personally is always going to be that feeling accepted, that being part of a team, because I've always been a lonely wolf. So I think for me, the mental challenge was to accept the fact that I'm going to meet all these new people, I'm going to share a tent and just kind of figure out that dynamic and how that would work. So that was always something I was a little bit worried about, who am I going to be with on the team? Are they going to be nice people? Are they going to accept me, the person I am and a teammate I am? So that was my biggest mental challenge always.
Yeah, and there were quite a few expeditions where you were the only woman, weren't there? Which, yeah, how was that?
Yeah, that was really interesting, and I think I'm a little bit perhaps tomboy. When my mom was pregnant with me, I shared this story on a Svalbard ski expedition with one of my teammates last week. I said to her, when my mom was pregnant with me, and I found their letters with my dad. My dad was in the army, and I remember reading these letters, and they were talking about me as little Tom, thinking that I was going to be a boy. And I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but honestly, Michelle, in all my life, everything I do, is not thinking, hey, I'm a woman, I can't do this or that, but I'm a person and I'm just going to try it. So when I picked up photography many years ago, I worked at, Formula One races. I was going to Brands Hatch and classic car meetings as a photographer. And again, that's not exactly a female, world, but to me, just whatever fascinates me and excites me, I'm just going to try. And to be to be the only woman on this team, there were occasions when I really felt it, or my team members made me feel that from the beginning that, hey, you're a girl, you're probably going to be the weakest link. So as a woman, I felt like I had to work extra hard to show them how strong I am and to show them that I deserve a spot on the team, which is crazy to think about. But in reality, we still have to do that, especially now. Imagine I'm a mountain and polo guide, again, a very male dominated world. So I just do it every day. But, I turn up and I do my preparation, trying to be like physically and mentally strong and show them that, yeah, I deserve a spot on a team or in this industry.
Yeah, and it's important for people to see that as well. It's important for other women to see that we can as well. I think that we can just go and do it and be as competitive.
I completely agree with you, and I follow so many female ultra runners as well, and I love to see how competitive we are and how in ultra distances and in endurance, it no longer matters that we are male or female. In fact, you might find this really interesting. So I work as an expedition guide in the polar regions in Antarctica and the Arctic. And it turns out that they've done research on female scientists who stay at these very, very remote polar centers or camps. And it turns out that women can actually deal with the cold and dark months and kind of longer days much better than men. So it's just really interesting. And I think it's really important to talk about these things that, share that we absolutely can. And what I found myself doing in some of the mountain bike races or the run races that I do, I don't actually compete with, I don't even look at the women's category. I look at the overall because I want to compete with everybody who entered a race. And yeah, I think that's just me. And I think I think now there's more and more female participation in expeditions. I see more and more women climbing at high altitude. We see more and more women entering even a park run to ultra distance racing. So I think it's slowly changing, yeah, for the better.
Yeah,
I
I
did follow.
agree. And we're recording this today on the day that they've just announced the London Marathon kind of ballot entries. And there is an even split actually of men and women entering. So that's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So women do want to be out there. You mentioned cycling there, Alex. You did a lot of cycling as well, kind of road cycling and like Tour de France stages, didn't you, in as part of your training? That sounds really tough.
I did. I realized after coming back from Everest, I realized that the spin classes just weren't doing for me anymore. And I walked into my local bike shop in Wimbledon and I said, I'm ready to buy a bike. And I bought a bike and I remember I took it out for a ride and it was just something didn't quite click. I sold the bike pretty much straight away and went back to the shop and I said, okay, I want the best bike for, in my budget. And I remember I'm quite a tall person and, with a tall torso. And they gave me like a 54 and I just struggled so much. I had back pain, like back issues. I did one of the 6-hour races. I think it was a Brands Hatch, an endurance race. And I remember winning it and I think coming like top 5, like overall something else. But I had so much pain because it wasn't the right bike. It wasn't the right size bike. And, I went in so naive, think, whatever, just like they recommend me. And then from that moment, learning on my own skin has been, quite a theme across the 7 summits, but also in my life as well. So, that bike, once I had a proper bike, once I had all the like good settings, the setup, I did, again, just threw myself into doing these like bigger days on the bike and joining cycling clubs and triathlon clubs and trying out triathlon as well, the shorter distances and riding longer distances and multi-stages. And, now looking back, it everything was helping me to the end goal. Everything was helping me to get fit and sharp for all these expeditions and ultimately for Everest as well that I climbed in
Yes,
20.
it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, I imagine, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Exactly. And I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but when you enjoy the training, you put more of you in it. And then, when you have to wake up like 4, 5 in the morning or do an evening session after a long day at work, but when you're putting on your favorite running shoes or you're hopping on your bike, like that you love and enjoy doing, I think training goes so much easier and so much better as well. And you are in a little bit better mental state as well. That's what I found.
Yeah. And so with your running and your cycling training, were you focused on endurance then, or were you looking at kind of climbing or sprints, or what were you looking to train there?
Absolutely everything. So I implemented the whole idea of what you do on an expedition. Some days you have to maybe go through some really technical sections. Some days you might be putting really long days in the mountains. So I kind of translated that into my training and into cycling and running as well. So for running, I would be doing anything from break interval sessions, like a long back to back. What I didn't realize is how it actually helped my actual running, and how it really started building me towards some really interesting kind of fun local races that some of them I won, some of them just, plays well, but I've never been fast. So it actually proved that, when you put that time into training and really focus on training, you are evolving and developing and your muscles are getting stronger, and then if that's your goal, then it is a process, but you should really look at kind of various training types and not just do one training. I think that again just also comes back to the point that like that mixes things up a little bit. You're not always just out there running, just running at the same pace and same tempo, but a couple of days later you could have like a sprint run or being on track, and these are, I think, they all contribute to great training and great preparation. So yeah, I did. So I didn't have a coach, I didn't have a training plan. But I looked at what I'm not good at. So I looked at my strengths and weaknesses. And I figured out, okay, I'm going to continue working on my strengths, but I really have to deep dive into why am I not as good in certain areas of running, cycling, or doing high altitude mountaineering. And that's a very personal, journey, a very personal thing to do. And I figured the only way I can do that is really like be honest with myself and really work on the things that I was just really not that good at. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were your priorities then when you started training? Because I'm guessing you were already pretty good at climbing, were you?
I really wasn't, especially given I have fear of heights. This project
Oh,
was,
do you?
yeah, it was on a very different level. It was quite challenging, and one of the mountains of the seven summits is a rock climb, and I was just thinking, holy guacamole! Like, how am I? It's part of it, so I can't just bypass. I can't just climb something else. And I think that's why the Seven Summits was so appealing to me, is because it's not just, similar height, similar looking mountains in one mountain range like in the Himalayas. It's like all so very different looking mountains and shaped mountains. So this particular one that was a rock climb, I started going to an indoor climbing gym in Kingston near Wimbledon. And again, just what I said earlier, each mountain required a completely different sort of approach and style. And that kind of probably made me a more overall mountaineer I am today, rather than just always being on snow or always doing the things that I love and enjoy. So, for example, one of those mountains, the Seven Summits, Carson's Pyramid, I had to train differently. And again, your training looks different. The hours that you put in look a little bit different, because then now you're focusing on, okay, I'm going to have to spend more time in the climbing gym. Next weekend, I'm not going to do those long back-to-back runs. Instead, I'm going to go to do climbing outdoors, and I'm going to have a climbing instructor, and I'm going to learn more from him, more from them, and going to expose myself to the elements. Or what else I can do? I could climb the Matterhorn as a training climb and have that exposure. So I very strategically, I knew what really my weaknesses were, but I was prepared and ready to, face my fear and work on my weaknesses.
Yeah. So are you still scared of heights now, having done all these seven
Oh gosh,
summits?
I'm much better. I'm definitely much better at heights, and I think that just shows that when you do face your fears, like one by one, it's not gonna change overnight, right? Well, whatever it is. But if we take that step towards trying to face our fears and um, accepting that this is what, accepting that we have it, we can work on it, but it's just not going to stop us from doing cool things.
Yeah, and most importantly, I think we can be scared and still do them, can't we? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I took out of
Do
your
you
book,
have
I
any,
think.
do you have any, Michelle?
Say
Do you have
again,
any,
sorry.
do you have any fears?
I'm not great with heights either, I must confess. I'm okay kind of climbing up things, but as soon as I try to come down again, that's when I freeze.
Yeah.
So that's
Interesting.
probably something I could work on if you've got any tips.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Come to the Swiss Alps, and we can work on that for sure.
So just talk us through what the seven summits are then, Alex, because we've mentioned a couple of them, and Everest is obviously one of them. Which are the others?
Okay, so the seven summits are the highest mountain on every continent. So let's start from. I can go in, in the order that I climbed them. So
Yeah, sure.
Europe's highest mountain is Elbrus. We mentioned in Russia, in the Caucasus Mountains. Next, I climbed Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest mountain in Tanzania. Then we have Mount Vinson in Antarctica. Then Denali. Denali is North America's highest mountain in the Denali National Park. Aconcagua is South America's highest point in Argentina. And Aconcagua is actually the tallest mountain outside the Himalayas. So if you put the Himalayas aside, Aconcagua almost 7,000 meters, is the tallest mountain on Earth. And then we have Karstens Pyramid. Now, Karstens Pyramid is in Indonesia, and it's Oceania's highest mountain. So you have Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, and all the other islands kind of collectively forming Oceania. And it is Karstens Pyramid that's the highest mountain. That was the rock climb. And of course, Mount Everest in Nepal, in Asia. And I did climb it from the south side from Nepal, but you can climb it from the north side from Tibet. So these are the 7 summits.
Yeah, wow. And you specifically chose the south side of Everest, didn't you? Because you wanted to do. I was reading that chapter last night in your book, about how you wanted to go through the ice fall, and that sounds terrifying. Can you paint us a picture of the ice fall as you
Oh,
begin to climb up Everest?
absolutely, absolutely, I can. So, a lot of people heard and know about. Maybe some of the listeners even been to Everest Base Camp. You've got very adventurous listeners, so I'm pretty sure some of them would have. So, when you're at Everest Base Camp, that's pretty much our home for the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks, and we do acclimatization hikes, acclimatization climbs through the Khumbu Icefall. And unfortunately, historically, it's been a very, very dangerous part on Everest. But because you're doing the acclimatization rounds each time, you have to get through. So imagine you're at the bottom of the mountain, bottom of Everest and Lhotse. From base camp, when you look up, you can't even see Everest at the summit at that spot. So you approach the ice fall, and the Khumbu Icefall is basically this huge glacier, and we know that glaciers are practically like frozen rivers. So, frozen river is something that constantly moves and constantly changes. So, you're walking amongst giant building house size blocks of ice, and all that they move around you. But not only that, you've got the glacier river underneath that you can't even see but you can hear. So it's like nowhere else. And I've been on so many glaciers, but the ice fall has all these kind of broken up ice blocks, and you have to navigate and find your way across. Now, there are icefall doctors who come at the beginning of the season. These are very, very highly skilled and knowledgeable Nepali mountain guides or mountain people whose job is to come at the beginning of the season, and they make the way. So from Everest Base Camp up to the top of the ice fall, they create the route. And the way to do that is they use ladders. So when you have these big cracks that formed in the ice, and that's because as the glacier moves, it starts losing its elasticity. And once it's done that, these cracks called crevasses form. And they're bottomless. When I say bottomless, you look down and you can't see anything. So what they do is they, to bridge the gap, they put ladders across, or whatever way the crack would be, they put ladders kind of against that crack. They secure the ladders on both ends, and you have to climb across these ladders. It can be anything, between 10, 15, 20, between base camp and camp 1. And of course, you go up to camp 1, that's your acclimatization. You might spend the night there, and then you down climb, you come back to base camp. And then the next rotation would be going through that again, go to camp 1, proceed to camp 2, maybe sleep there as well, then maybe tag camp 3, come back, and then wait for the good weather to do this all over again. And when you're back at camp 3, you would be sleeping there. Perhaps you would put oxygen on already, and from that moment, it's camp 4 and the summit of Everest. So you have to go through the ice fall minimum, if you do these rotations, which are really, really important for our human body to be able to adapt to the high altitude. So you have to go through that a number of times. And luckily, there are other mountains nearby that you can do the in-between acclimatization rounds and hikes to keep the legs sticking over. But the more you've gone through the ice fall, of course, it's very dangerous and very risky. But I found myself, I don't know about you, but I found myself, if something looks very intimidating the first time, it's not as bad the second time and the third time. And yes, I really, really wanted to do the Khumbu. So I really wanted to feel that, I wanted to feel that I'm very, very small in the mountains. And I think that feeling is so important. It's oh, what's the right word when suddenly you it's not overwhelming. It's more like, when you realize how small we are,
Yeah.
um, and where we actually are. So yeah, the Khumbu Icefall, absolutely incredible experience, except that during one of our acclimatization round, there was an earthquake that damaged everything that these amazing icefall doctors built. And of course, imagine if it's risky for us, how risky it is for that team to establish the route. So they had to come back. We had to wait above the ice fall until we got the radio message that the route has been fixed, and then we can continue descending. So you are in the mountains, you're on ice, and then anything can happen anytime. So but yeah, that was an incredible part of the whole journey, an incredible experience.
Yeah, and Everest, of course, is incredibly dangerous. Not only because of that, but because of the death zone, and our human bodies are not designed to be that high, really, are they? Was there ever any point where you were kind of fearful for your life in terms of like worrying about going up there, or do you just have to be confident and
Yeah, I've when I was writing the book, I was really waiting for, from all my notes, and all the diary entries. I was almost like half expecting as reading somebody else's diary entry. I'm like, what? Like, were you nervous? Were you nervous about? And I
yeah,
really wasn't. For some reason, that wasn't one of the things that I was concerned about. I was concerned about other things, but the height wasn't really that. I just figured that. I've done a very, very solid training, and I built up the seven summits. I got to the point that, yes, I had never been to 8,000 meters at that point, but I trusted myself. I trusted my training, and I trusted the people who were around me and who were supporting me back at base camp as well. And when we talk about running as well, let's say maybe like a longer ultra, it's not just that person running it, it's the whole team around, it's the people around you as well on the mountain during the race. It's so very similar, actually, an ultra distance running race or a run to mountaineering. And there were a couple of things that went wrong, completely out of my control, in the dev zone. So unfortunately, my Sherpa climbing partner got altitude sickness, and I that's when you really learn how to. Okay, it's maybe a little bit late how to learn how to problem solve, but I'm a problem solver, and I was like, okay, this is not going to be an issue. This is not going to be a problem. What can we do? We are right here, right now. We're not going to panic. We're not going to turn around. What can we do to keep continuing? What can we do to solve this thing? So no, the height was never really my concern. I was actually just couldn't wait to be higher and higher. I'm just going to say the higher you go, the views get better. But I know it's not always the case. It was something I was really, really looking forward to progress on that mountain. And it was the only mountain I never Googled or researched how the summit looks, Michelle. I just wanted to be on the summit of Everest, and I wanted to see that for myself. And it's a gorgeous view from there.
how was it? Like, how do you feel at the summit of Everest?
Oh my God, relieved. Honestly relieved. But of course, the job is not done at the summit. A lot of people, you probably heard this, that a lot of people get into tricky situations on the way down because
Yeah,
people spend a lot of time. There's actually maybe something a little bit different to an ultra. When you get to a finish line in an ultra, you can kind of collapse, have a pint of beer, and then okay, done. Unfortunately, Everest, it is not until you back at base camp where you're like, okay, we've done it. So it's really just kind of job half done when you're at the top, because there's a long way down. There are still climbers coming up. There's one rope. Luckily, that was the last year in 2018 when there was just one rope for up and down climbing. But I think since then there are now like kind of two rope systems in tricky areas. So the climbing can flow better, but it's I remember getting kind of very, very close to the summit, and I ended up climbing with my climbing partner's uncle, who was on the team purely to carry oxygen for my teammates. But because my climbing partner was too sick to come to the summit with me, to go to the summit together, the uncle kind of crawls out of the Sherpa tent and then just bolts it to the fixed line. Like, oh wow, I just spent the last how many weeks with Tashi training, getting to know him, and now I'm with someone who doesn't even speak. We don't speak the same language, and it's really, really interesting what unfolded during my summit night, and how, putting my faith into him and he putting his faith into me, we kind of just, we managed it, and we were very, very close to the summit. I don't know, it's in the book. Maybe I should, no, I'm going to share. So very near the summit, and we had 4 or 5 climbers in front of us, and they were moving. They were really, really slow. You're on one rope, they're not moving. And then they turned around and he looked into my eyes through our goggles, and I knew exactly what he was going to ask from me. And I bowed, and he unclipped us from the fixed line, and we climbed to the top of Everest, kind of bypassing, overtaking these climbers who were moving. So that was an incredible feeling, and there were other things that went wrong that summit night. For example, my oxygen was breaking. So by that point, I was quite used to not having an oxygen as an aid. So I took my oxygen off on the summit, and we were up there for about 45 minutes with Dandy before we went back down. But it was, yeah, I jokingly said relief, Michelle. It really, really was a relief. It was, almost 4 years of journey, and it wasn't just that expedition. It was everything from the beginning. From coming up with the idea. Talking about it to potential partners and sponsors, and people supporting me at home. It really was that, okay, I made it. I know I still have to get down, but I made it, and this is how it feels. And we had a beautiful bluebird sky day, just a slight breeze, just exactly enough for you to have a bit of a fresh air. Who doesn't like a fresh air at 8,000 meters? But it was incredible. And then you're sitting on the summit, and you can see climbers making their way up from the pole, and you turn around, climbers coming up from the north side, and there's nothing else is higher than you, just around. And that vista, that landscape of all the 6, 7 other 8,000 meter peaks around you, just absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, it must have been a very emotional moment indeed. Now, you had done a lot of altitude training. I think it's important to say, isn't it? Yeah, you slept in an altitude tent for a whole month. That's incredible commitment. That must have been very tough.
I did, and for Everest, I put all my eggs into one basket. I thought, this is I summited all mountains up until that point on my first attempt. And that was, again, another pressure that I put on myself, thinking, I've done them all in the first attempt. And some of these mountains, people go back 2, 3, 4 times, like Denali. It's a very long expedition. It's a tough climb, due to weather conditions and exhaustion and all that. And I, of course, if something happened, I would have returned to Everest, but I really wanted to finish the project, and I really wanted to arrive there and give the mountain the right respect and the right correct preparation. And I figured if altitude training tent would give me that extra 5% or 10%, then I'm gonna put up with that 1 month sleeping in a greenhouse, and I did that, and again, just kind of looking into these things, what can help me for certain mountains and certain projects, and I realized that as much as I wanted to spend more time, in the Alps, I had a job. I had a full-time job, and I was working part-time as well to pay for the expedition fee. And I figured if I just invest a little bit into this altitude tent, it might be a really good addition to my training. And I had been to the altitude center in central London. And doing a couple of sessions, but I wanted something a little bit more not long term, but something a little bit more consistent. And I figured sleeping in a tent would probably give me exactly what I need. So yeah, I had this generator and a tube that goes into, so you set up a tent around your bed. So a tube goes in and it sucks the oxygen out of the tent, but it also repressurizes it. It's, trying to simulate the conditions that you have at high altitude. And this generator itself, it's got a chart, so you know exactly resetting what altitude you are at. So I started, day one was at 2,200, just above 2,200 meters. And every evening I would set it higher and higher and higher. And as you said, I slept in there for a month. And the last week of that month, I slept in my own bed in Wimbledon above 6,500 meters.
Wow.
And that allowed me to fly the next day from London to Kathmandu, and the next day to fly from Kathmandu to Lukla, which is most of the trekking start. Lukla mountain town, around 2,800 meters, if I remember well. And from Lukla, I took a helicopter and I met the rest of my team at a small village above 4,000 meters. So I've literally gone from, sea level London in 72 hours. I was at 4,000 meters. And the reason I did that, so I had a very good reason behind that. I skipped the first week of trekking. I had been, as I mentioned before, I had been to Everest Base Camp, Gokyo Lake, so I knew the route. I was there again a second time when I attempted to climb Amadablam. And I realized that trekking and climbing season is very, very busy, and how many people have the Khumbu cough and carry all sorts of things that I wanted to protect myself from. And I figured kind of skipping that first week of trekking that I already had done, previously a number of times. Let's see if it works. And I was kind of a guinea pig, figuring out if this system works. Actually, believe it or not, since that company started offering Everest with, pre-acclimatizing at home. So I didn't realize it at the time, but I was probably doing some interesting testing. But yeah, it worked.
Yeah, you were doing the market research for them, Alex, by the sounds of it. Yeah, trendsetter. Yeah, it obviously paid off for you, though. It obviously helped.
It definitely did, yeah. Have you ever done any altitude training with a mask or in a chair?
No, I haven't. I was interested reading because you also went to the Rift Valley to do some training as well. What was that like?
The where?
The Rift Valley to Iten. Am I saying that correctly?
Oh yes, the Rift Valley Iten. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. So I was at this canyon running center, and it was incredible. And oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible to see the canyons running. I remember on the first day, I went there with my ex-partner at the time, who was training for a sub-3 marathon. And it was his idea to go. And he asked me sheepishly if I would be maybe interested in. I was like, absolutely. This is the sort of things that I really, really, really enjoy doing. So we went there. He was obviously very much focused on his marathon training. And he had a couple of canyons to train with. And in the meantime, I was off on my own little adventure. And sometimes we'd run together. But running at altitude. Have you ever run at altitude?
I've never tried it, no.
Michelle, it again, it's very, very personal, because I think some people adapt much better than others, and my body needs a lot of time to adapt. I think either that or give my body like that shock. I climbed Mont Blanc solo in 24 hours of flying out from London, no acclimatization, climbed the Matterhorn without acclimatization. So I knew I could do these things, but I really also wanted to test what it does to your body when you spend time at altitude and training at the very, very high level. But of course, when you take a look around you and you've got these canyon groups passing you, and like gazelles, their feet hardly touching the ground, and then you can hear you're all kind of thumping around. I'm like, we are on definitely very, very different levels. But just to take a little bit off from their training etiquettes and protocols and routines, definitely enriched my own training and my own life. And yeah, incredible experience. Yeah.
Do you feel that, because I know we talked about how the running has helped your training for mountains, do you feel the altitude has helped your running? Is that something you've been able to test out?
Yes, absolutely. And now, I live in St. Moritz in the Swiss Alps, and I definitely feel that I'm slowly, when I get back to St. Moritz from being away for a couple of weeks or months, usually when my season ends, I go away. And I do feel it when I go back there. I do struggle a little bit at the beginning, but I also feel when I come down a little bit to lower altitudes that, I feel a little bit better. But again, we are all very different. And I know that for some people that is an even bigger impact, and that's an even bigger change or bonus to train at altitude. I personally haven't noticed a huge change of that. But I did do something, again, just a testing on myself. When I finished the Seven Summits project, came back from Everest in May 2018, I signed up to do an ultra in the lakes. And Michelle, I was just banking on my having spent 6 weeks at altitude, and I just banged on, hey, I'm just going to be absolutely fine. And oh my gosh, I wasn't.
Wow.
You still need, and that was like months and months later. But I was quite neat, thinking just because in May, I spent 6 weeks in Nepal, that's going to have a positive effect a few months later. It probably did endurance wise. The altitude doesn't, was worn out. Like it doesn't work, that late, or for that long. But I think it's something that I would encourage people to maybe try out and test themselves, because I think it could be quite beneficial. For sure, very strategically, that sleeping in an altitude tent for a month absolutely worked for me. So I could start my expedition at 4,000 meters and feeling absolutely fine. So that kind of gap, that worked really, really well. Whether altitude training itself would work on, preparing for a race, I personally haven't really tested, but I love the idea that it's there, it's possible. And I think I would just encourage people to do all these tests and figure out what works for them.
Yeah, everyone's an individual, aren't they? Which ultra was it that you did in the lakes, Alex?
I think it was called the Lakes Ultra.
Yeah.
And I bonked like there's no tomorrow. So I had zero nutrition plan, Michelle. I had no idea. I didn't even carry anything with me. And it was 2018, and I remember it was so incredibly hot. I really do struggle at heat. So that's something I know. Again, that's one of my weaknesses. I know I really, really struggle in the heat. I just prefer colder climates.
Yeah.
And I really, really struggled that day. I hardly had any water with me. I hardly had any nutrition with me. And at the beginning, when you probably don't need that for the first couple of hills, I was up there, in the top 3 with, I think there was a professional. I think she ended up winning. And I was the first female for a long time. And as my breakfast, started wearing off and my breakfast bar, I just started, slowly, realizing that something was really, really wrong here. But again, I don't know about you, but I think we learn so much from things that went wrong.
Yeah, we do.
And
Yeah.
and that was a very, very good eye opener for me to realize that, okay, you've gone through the 7 summits and you respected all the mountains and the training. An ultra, you have to do the same. And I'm actually almost glad that that happened to me, because from that moment I realized just how much preparation it takes, to not just run, because I had been doing the back-to-back runs, Richmond Park and here and there, training for the 7 summits. But when it comes to racing and you going all out and you're running up these hills and mountains, that requires a very different planning. And I'm really glad that I kind of had that experience, because I learned so much from it.
Yeah, no, I'm pleased you said that, because I think in this day and age with social media, it feels like everybody's doing ultras and that there's nothing to
Yeah,
it, and
yeah,
they're easy, and they're not, are they? Like you say, we do have to respect the
yeah,
distance. So I'm pleased you've talked about that.
yeah.
Have you been back to ultra distance since that experience?
Oh gosh, no, I haven't. But I would love to. I really, really would love to. I started. So my prize for climbing the 7 summits and having met someone else who was into mountain biking, I picked up a cross country bike, and it just like with everything else, Michelle, I threw myself into cross country mountain biking, and it was back in 2018, 2019. I had this beautiful lightweight cross country bike, carbon built, and I remember I was thinking, okay, so I could just go on adventures, right? I mean, I could just cross the Alps. I could just go to Patagonia and cross Patagonia on my mountain bike with my tent and all that. And I remember taking the bike into the actual brand's shop, and I told him that something went wrong, and I just got back from this trip, and the mechanic looked at my bike and he goes, "Please don't tell me that you've done this kind of mountain, 2-week mountain adventure on this kind of cross-country racing bike." I'm like, yeah, I did. So I just wanted to use that bike for racing, for training, for having fun, for going on big adventures. And yeah, so I really, I focused on mountain biking. I became a mountain bike guide. And this is the time that I'm still working as a marketing manager in an office. And a year later, a year after I climbed Everest, I quit my job. And because I had the qualification as a mountain bike guide, I figured, okay, what else do I want to do? So I qualified as British athletics running instructor or running leader as well. And then I began my journey on the international mountain leader and polar guiding. But yeah, so I'm a qualified running coach, and I always think, especially still today in my training and how I train others as well, to always implement anything running and biking related. I realized how much these sports helped me with the 7 summits, and how far you can get on bikes and on your own 2 feet. Doesn't even have to be a race, but just adventuring and being out there in nature. So yeah, that's that. I have not answered your question about picking a race or not. I think I will do one. I'm following races in the UK. I'm following races, in the Alps, of course, and over in the States as well. I listen to your podcast. I listen to ultra distance running podcasts and trail podcasts as well. And I'm definitely, every time I listen to a podcast and I listen to somebody who talks about, trail running, ultra running, I'm just like, yeah, that's still have to be on the horizon and on my to-do list, my bucket list.
Yes. Oh,
What
so
would you recommend
watch this
if you would
space.
recommend? Okay, if you would have to pick an ultra race for me, what would you go for?
Oh, what would we go for? I think, and I know because I'm a running coach and I've got a lot of clients who are working towards the Lakeland 50 at the moment. I don't know if that's the same one that you did,
Yeah, I think
but
it is,
that is quite a popular one. I'm personally working towards the lap in September, which is around Lake Windermere.
Oh, wow.
Which I love the sound of, just circumnavigating a body of water. But
Yeah.
there's so many races around the UK and around, Europe. European trail running is huge, isn't it?
It's massive. It's booming right now. And I think it's really amazing to see this incredible sport um, developing so fast. And yeah, just going back to what you mentioned about, men, women, just to see the participation. It may not ever be equal, the UTMB, for example, or other long distance races, but it's definitely getting there. And I think what you do is incredible because you you share all these stories that there are people who listen to your podcast, listen to these episodes, and just that light bulb moment, right? That, hey, that sounds amazing. Let's just try to do that. And when I listen to your podcast and those incredible people that you invite, I get inspired every single day just listening to their stories and where they have taken their running, and even their background as well, where they came from and arrived, and what direction they have taken. And I think, again, it's just mentioning that everyone's path is different. And if you start with a 5K park run, just to get you off the couch, but you have dreams of running the UTMB one day, people can get there. And
Yeah.
it's just like climbing Ben Nevis and then one day have the dream to summit an 8,000-meter peak. It doesn't have to be Everest. Not everybody has to climb Everest, but to have like a goal, a big, crazy, wild dream ahead of you, and work towards that, and run, bike, be outdoors, eat as healthy as you can. It's just you just create this life. You just create this journey for yourself. And I think a lot of people, probably a lot of your listeners and people come on your podcast to talk, they probably mentioned this, that how many times they surprised themselves of being able to do something that they probably didn't think they could have achieved. And yeah, just something I mentioned also to my teammate on Svalbard last week, that I just want to get to the end of this journey, this life journey, and feeling exhausted and dirty, and to have as many memories and incredible experiences as we can. And that's just, as you said, there's so many races out there, so many adventures that we can do. And I hope with my story I managed to not inspire, but that's a huge word, but maybe motivate people to, you don't have to have that mountaineering background. You don't have to have that endurance background. You can learn, you can practice, you can do the training, and just get out there.
Yeah. You say not inspire, but you've certainly inspired me. I've, as I said before we started recording, I've just finished Alex's book, which is Beyond the Seven Summits. And yeah, it put a huge smile on my face about what's actually possible, when you can have a dream and think that's impossible, but you actually set out and you achieved it. And I think it's wonderful. So while you're inspired by our guests, I'm sure our guests will be equally inspired. or our listeners, sorry, will be equally inspired by your story today, Alex. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. Where can people find you on social media if they want to know more?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. I'm active on Instagram. It's Alex7Summits. 7 is with a number. So Alex number 7 summits. My website is alex7summits.com. And if anybody has any questions about, the training, the preparation, the running I've done, or about their own training or anything, I'm very, very approachable. All the 7 summits, I'm very approachable. Drop me a message, drop me a note, and I'm very, very happy to be connecting with your listeners. And that's it. The book is also my website. I have all the books with me. I'm here in the UK for a couple of months this summer, obviously coming and going on expeditions, but I have a number of books with me, and every single book is hand signed by me with a personal message. And I post every single book one by one myself. So I just wanted to make it a very personal experience. It's easy to kind of purchase it on my website, but everything will be sent from where I am right now. It's Evimore in the Cairngorms in Scotland.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Alex. We'll put all those links in our show notes for listeners. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do take a moment to share it with a friend or somebody that you run with, especially if they're struggling with motivation right now. I'm sure this will give them a boost. As always, you can join in the conversation on socials with the UK RunChat hashtag. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.